Hello Army, welcome back to my channel. If you were anywhere near Korean social media this week, you probably saw the same headline I did, and honestly, even after years of covering this fandom, this one still managed to catch me off guard. We are talking about Jungkook, Chanel, and a brand new fragrance campaign that sold out in 28 countries almost as soon as it went live. Not 28 cities. Not 28 stores. 28 entire countries, across multiple continents, gone within minutes of release. Today we are breaking down exactly what happened, why it happened so fast, and why even Korean netizens, people who are used to seeing BTS break records at this point, could not stop talking about it. Let's start with the basics, because I want to make sure everyone watching understands the actual scale of what we are discussing here. Chanel is not some small independent fragrance brand looking for a marketing boost. Chanel is one of the oldest, most prestigious luxury houses in the entire world, a name that has been synonymous with high fashion and timeless elegance for over a century. When Chanel decides to launch a major fragrance campaign, that is already a massive event in the beauty and fashion industry on its own. Now add Jungkook as the face of that campaign, and you have a combination that turned out to be far more powerful than anyone, including Chanel itself, may have anticipated. The fragrance in question is part of Chanel's prestigious 1957 line, a collection known for its refined, exclusive positioning within the brand's overall portfolio. This is not a mass-market drugstore fragrance. This is a premium product, priced accordingly, and typically marketed toward a very specific, often older, luxury-focused consumer base. That context matters enormously here, because what happened next completely defied the usual expectations for how a product like this performs, especially this quickly after launch. Within minutes, and I mean actual minutes, of the campaign going live featuring Jungkook, the fragrance began selling out across markets. Not just one or two regions. Not a slow trickle of sellouts over a few days. We are talking about 28 separate countries reaching sold-out status in an incredibly short window of time. For anyone who understands how global luxury retail typically works, with different regional stock levels, different shipping timelines, different market demands, this kind of near-simultaneous sellout across so many countries is almost unheard of. I also want to walk through why the 28-country detail specifically is such a big deal within the luxury retail world, because on the surface it might just sound like a nice round number, but the operational reality behind it is genuinely staggering. Every country that carries a Chanel fragrance line typically manages its own regional stock allocation, based on historical sales data, local market size, and projected demand for that specific product. These allocations are usually calculated well in advance, often months before a launch, using data-driven forecasting models designed to prevent exactly this kind of scenario from happening. For a brand as large and as experienced as Chanel to have its calculated stock projections overwhelmed this dramatically, across nearly 30 separate markets simultaneously, tells you that actual demand vastly outpaced even their most optimistic internal expectations. Let's also think about this from a pure retail logistics standpoint for a moment. Chanel boutiques and authorized retailers do not typically operate with unlimited inventory sitting in a backroom waiting to be restocked instantly. Luxury goods, in particular, are often produced in more limited batches compared to mass-market products, partly to preserve the sense of exclusivity that defines the luxury shopping experience in the first place. When you combine limited batch production with a sudden, massive, globally synchronized wave of demand, you get exactly the kind of rapid, widespread sellout that we saw here. This was not a supply chain failure on Chanel's part. This was a demand surge so overwhelming that it outpaced even a well-resourced luxury brand's typical safety margins. Now let's talk about the price point, because this is where the story gets even more interesting. This fragrance retails at a price point equivalent to roughly 600,000 Korean won. For context, that is a genuinely premium price for a perfume, well above what most casual consumers would consider an impulse purchase. This is not a $5 convenience store item. This is a considered, often carefully saved for, luxury purchase. And yet, fans moved fast enough, and in large enough numbers, to clear out inventory across 28 countries almost instantly. This is exactly the detail that caught the attention of Korean netizens and sparked such a massive online conversation. When the news started circulating on Korean online communities, the reactions were a mix of genuine shock and admiration. Comments began flooding in, with users expressing disbelief at just how quickly a product at this price point could disappear from shelves across so many markets simultaneously. One widely shared comment specifically pointed out the astonishing nature of a premium product selling out across nearly 30 countries almost immediately after release. Another comment focused specifically on the purchasing power of the fanbase itself, describing it in terms that reflected genuine surprise at how organized and immediate the response was. What I find particularly interesting is how this story spread beyond the existing BTS fanbase entirely. In the middle of this online conversation, comments started appearing from people who explicitly identified themselves as having no prior connection to BTS or K-pop at all. One comment that gained significant traction came from someone who described themselves primarily as a football fan, someone who had only recently become aware of Jungkook because of his high-profile involvement with the FIFA World Cup. That commenter openly admitted developing an interest in Jungkook specifically because of that exposure, and cited his appearance as part of what drew their attention. This detail is honestly one of the most important parts of this entire story, because it shows just how far Jungkook's individual visibility has expanded beyond the traditional K-pop audience. I also want to dig a little deeper into the specific netizen comments that circulated, because the exact wording used really does reveal something about how differently this event was perceived depending on who was reacting to it. Some comments focused purely on the financial angle, expressing disbelief that a product priced this high could move this quickly. Other comments shifted the focus entirely toward Jungkook himself, framing the sellout less as a story about the fragrance and more as a story about the sheer scale of his personal drawing power. And then there were the comments from newer, more casual observers, people who seemed to be encountering the full scope of his popularity for what sounded like the very first time, reacting with a kind of genuine surprise that only comes from discovering something completely new. Seeing all three of those reaction types layered together in the same comment section paints a much fuller picture of just how wide-reaching this story actually became. Let's take a step back and talk about why this kind of crossover appeal matters so much in the bigger picture. For years, one of the central challenges facing any K-pop artist trying to build global recognition has been breaking out of the existing fanbase and reaching completely new audiences who may have had zero previous exposure to the genre. Chart success within the fandom is one thing. Genuine crossover appeal, the kind that gets a self-identified football fan talking about a K-pop idol's fragrance campaign, is an entirely different and much harder achievement. And based on the reaction we are seeing here, Jungkook appears to be doing exactly that on a global scale. A huge part of this crossover moment traces directly back to his recent involvement with the FIFA World Cup, a connection that introduced him to an entirely new global audience of sports fans who may never have actively sought out K-pop content before in their lives. Sports and music crossovers like this are incredibly powerful precisely because they reach people through a completely different entry point. Someone tuning in for football content, football-related coverage, or World Cup-related media suddenly finds themselves exposed to Jungkook, and for at least some portion of that audience, that exposure sparks genuine curiosity that carries over into other areas, including, apparently, luxury fragrance campaigns. I also want to spend a little time talking about how sports crossover moments like this tend to behave differently compared to other types of celebrity crossover exposure. When someone discovers an artist through a music-related channel, whether that is a chart hit, a radio play, or a viral clip, there is usually an immediate, direct connection to that artist's actual music. Sports crossovers work very differently. Someone discovering Jungkook through World Cup coverage is not necessarily engaging with his music at all in that initial moment. They are engaging with his personality, his presence, his visibility within an entirely unrelated context. That kind of exposure often creates a softer, more gradual on-ramp into deeper interest, starting with general curiosity about who this person is, and slowly expanding from there into awareness of his music, his group, and eventually, moments like this fragrance campaign. In many ways, that gradual on-ramp can end up creating a more durable, long-lasting fan or admirer than a single viral music moment might, simply because it develops more organically over time. Now let's go back to the sellout itself and really dig into what this means from a brand partnership perspective. When Chanel selected Jungkook as the face of this campaign, they were making a significant bet. Luxury brands do not choose their global ambassadors casually. These decisions typically go through extensive internal deliberation, market research, and brand alignment discussions, because a luxury house's reputation depends heavily on maintaining a very specific image. Choosing the right ambassador can elevate a brand's visibility and desirability in new markets. Choosing the wrong one can be a costly and image-damaging misstep. The fact that this campaign produced results this immediate and this dramatic suggests that Chanel's bet on Jungkook paid off in a way that likely exceeded even their own internal projections. I also want to bring up how quickly this kind of result can shift internal perception within a company as large and as historically cautious as Chanel. Brands operating at this level tend to move carefully and deliberately, especially when it comes to major ambassador decisions, because the financial and reputational stakes involved are enormous. A campaign result like this one, a near-total, multi-country sellout within minutes, is exactly the kind of outcome that gets flagged internally, discussed at a leadership level, and used as supporting evidence for future strategic decisions. It is the kind of result that can quietly reshape how a legacy brand thinks about its long-term ambassador strategy going forward, not just for this specific fragrance line, but potentially across other product categories within the broader Chanel portfolio as well. I also want to talk about the map that circulated alongside this story, because it visually captured just how widespread this sellout actually was. The image showed flags representing the 28 countries where the fragrance sold out, spanning across Asia, Europe, and beyond, with sold-out stamps marking market after market. Seeing that many national flags represented in a single graphic, all connected to the same sellout event, really drives home just how genuinely global this moment was. This was not a regional phenomenon limited to Korea or nearby Asian markets. This was a coordinated, near-simultaneous sellout spanning multiple continents and vastly different consumer markets, each with their own distinct retail environments and purchasing behaviors. I also want to touch on the visual side of that circulated graphic for a moment, because I think it played a real role in how quickly this story spread online. Seeing a single image packed with national flags from every corner of the globe, each one stamped with a bold sold-out marker, creates an immediate, almost overwhelming visual impact that a simple headline or text post cannot fully replicate. Human brains process visual information incredibly quickly, and a graphic like that communicates the sheer scale of this moment in a fraction of a second, which is exactly why it was so widely shared, reposted, and translated across different fan communities and language groups within hours of the original news breaking. Let's also talk about what this means for how brands approach K-pop partnerships moving forward. For years, luxury fashion houses have increasingly turned to K-pop idols as brand ambassadors, recognizing the passionate, highly engaged nature of these fan bases. But results like this one raise the bar significantly for what a successful partnership can actually achieve. A near-instantaneous, multi-continent sellout of a premium fragrance is not just a good result, it is an exceptional one, the kind of outcome that likely gets referenced internally at other luxury houses when they are evaluating their own potential celebrity partnerships going forward. I also want to bring in a comparison to help put this achievement into perspective. Think about the last time you heard of any celebrity-endorsed product, in any industry, selling out across nearly 30 different countries within minutes of release. Even massive global superstars with decades-long careers rarely produce this kind of immediate, simultaneous, multi-continent impact from a single campaign launch. Most celebrity-driven product launches see demand build gradually, spread out unevenly across different regions depending on that celebrity's relative popularity in each specific market. The fact that this sellout happened so uniformly, across such a wide range of countries with very different cultural relationships to both luxury fragrance and K-pop as a genre, speaks to just how broadly Jungkook's individual appeal has grown at this stage of his career. I also want to spend a moment appreciating the logistics side of this story, because I think it often gets overlooked in conversations like this. For a product to sell out across 28 countries in such a short window, that requires an enormous amount of coordinated demand happening at nearly the exact same time across dramatically different time zones. Fans in Asia, fans in Europe, and fans across other regions were all apparently moving on this purchase within a similarly tight window, despite being active at completely different hours of the day depending on their location. That kind of synchronized, global purchasing behavior reflects an extraordinarily well-connected and highly motivated fan base, one that stays informed and ready to act the moment a product like this becomes available. I also want to talk briefly about the role that social media speed plays in enabling this kind of rapid, synchronized purchasing behavior. In previous decades, news about a product launch might spread gradually through traditional media channels, word of mouth, or in-store displays, giving retailers a much longer runway before demand actually translated into purchases. Today, a single announcement can reach millions of highly engaged fans within seconds through social media platforms, group chats, and fan-run notification accounts specifically dedicated to tracking release schedules for exactly these kinds of moments. That compressed information gap between announcement and purchase is a huge part of why sellouts like this one can happen on such an incredibly short timeline. Fans are not just interested, they are actively organized and ready to act the instant a product becomes available. Now, I want to address something that often comes up in conversations like this, because I think it is worth addressing directly. Sometimes when stories like this circulate, there can be a temptation to frame it purely as fans spending excessively on merchandise tied to a celebrity. But I think that framing misses an important part of the picture here. This is a genuine luxury fragrance from one of the most respected fashion houses in the world, a product that stands entirely on its own merits within the beauty industry, regardless of any celebrity endorsement attached to it. Fans purchasing this fragrance are not just buying a piece of merchandise, they are purchasing a legitimate luxury product that happens to feature an artist they admire as its global face. That distinction matters, because it reflects genuine crossover interest in Jungkook's appeal translating into interest in a completely separate industry, the luxury fragrance market, rather than simply reflecting typical fandom merchandise spending patterns. I also want to acknowledge how unusual it is for a story rooted in the beauty and fragrance industry to travel this far outside its typical audience. Fragrance news, even major launches from top-tier luxury houses, usually stays fairly contained within dedicated beauty communities, industry trade coverage, and loyal customers of that specific brand. It rarely breaks through into mainstream entertainment conversation, and it almost never generates the kind of cross-platform, multilingual discussion we saw here, spanning fan translation accounts, general entertainment news aggregators, and casual social media users simply reacting to how wild the numbers sounded. That level of crossover reach, from a niche luxury product category into broad, general public conversation, is a strong indicator of just how much cultural weight Jungkook's name alone currently carries. Let's also talk about what this moment says about Jungkook's individual brand power at this specific point in his career. Within BTS, each member has developed their own distinct public image and areas of individual recognition over the years. Jungkook, in particular, has increasingly built a reputation as one of the group's most commercially powerful individual assets, whether through his solo music releases, his high-profile brand partnerships, or moments like his recent World Cup-related appearances. This fragrance sellout fits directly into that larger pattern, reinforcing the idea that his individual pull, separate from the group as a whole, continues to grow at a remarkable pace. I also want to bring up how this fits into a much longer pattern of individual member achievements that have continued to build over recent years, even as the group as a whole has navigated a busy and demanding schedule. Solo chart-topping releases, major brand ambassadorships across multiple industries, high-profile television and sports-related appearances, each of these moments has added another layer to Jungkook's individual public profile, separate from, but still connected to, his identity as a member of BTS. This fragrance sellout is really just the latest entry in that ongoing pattern, but the scale and speed of this particular moment make it one of the more striking examples we have seen so far. I also want to touch on the psychological angle of why premium purchases like this move so quickly within passionate fan communities. When a fan base is this engaged and this well organized, purchasing decisions tend to happen extremely fast once a product becomes available, driven by a combination of genuine excitement, a desire to support the artist's associated brand partnerships, and, frankly, a bit of urgency created by limited stock knowledge. Fans within this community are often highly attuned to release schedules and campaign announcements, meaning that by the time a product actually goes live, there is already a substantial, ready-to-purchase audience waiting for exactly that moment. That kind of built-in demand readiness is part of what makes sellouts like this one possible on such a compressed timeline. I also want to spend a moment on how quickly translation communities moved on this story, because that is often an overlooked but genuinely important part of how international fandom news spreads. Within a fandom this globally distributed, dedicated fan translators and community accounts play an enormous role in taking Korean language news, screenshots, and netizen reactions, and making them accessible to English-speaking audiences and beyond within hours, sometimes even minutes, of the original posts going up. That rapid translation infrastructure is part of why a story rooted entirely in Korean online communities was able to reach international audiences, including audiences in the United States, so quickly. Without that kind of dedicated, volunteer-driven translation effort, stories like this one would likely take much longer to reach a truly global audience, if they reach that audience at all. Now let's circle back to the online reaction itself, because I think the specific wording used by Korean netizens tells us a lot about how this story landed within Korea's broader online culture. The comments expressing genuine shock at the price point combined with the speed of the sellout reflect something important. This was not just fandom communities celebrating a win. This was general Korean internet culture, including people outside the immediate fanbase, reacting with genuine surprise at the sheer scale and speed of what happened. When a story crosses over from fandom-specific spaces into broader mainstream online discussion within Korea itself, that is a strong signal of just how significant the moment actually was. I also want to point out how differently this story would have unfolded just a few years ago, before Jungkook had built up this level of individual global recognition outside the group. A campaign like this, tied to an artist with a smaller individual footprint, might have generated solid, respectable sales figures within existing fan markets, without ever producing the kind of dramatic, headline-generating, multi-continent sellout we are discussing today. The fact that this result happened now, at this specific point in his career, reflects just how much his individual public profile has grown, expanding well beyond what even dedicated fans might have expected a few years earlier. I also want to bring up how this ties into the ongoing conversation about celebrity influence within the luxury goods market more broadly. Across the fashion and beauty industry globally, there has been a noticeable shift in recent years toward brands leaning more heavily on individual celebrity ambassadors to drive both visibility and direct sales. What makes this particular case stand out is the sheer speed and scale of the resulting demand. Many celebrity partnerships generate a gradual increase in brand interest and sales over weeks or months. This situation instead produced an almost immediate, overwhelming surge strong enough to empty inventory across nearly 30 countries in a matter of minutes. That kind of instantaneous impact is exactly the type of outcome that luxury brands dream about when structuring these kinds of ambassador deals. I also want to briefly touch on the broader financial implications of a result like this, from a pure business standpoint. When a premium product sells out this quickly and this widely, the resulting revenue impact for a brand the size of Chanel can be substantial. Beyond the immediate sales figures from this specific fragrance release, sellouts of this magnitude also tend to generate significant earned media value, meaning the amount of free press coverage, social media buzz, and organic online discussion the campaign receives without any additional paid advertising spend. That kind of earned media value is often just as valuable, if not more valuable, to a brand than the direct product sales themselves, because it extends the campaign's visibility and impact far beyond what the original marketing budget alone could have achieved. Let's also take a moment to talk about the World Cup connection in a bit more depth, because I think it deserves its own dedicated discussion within this story. Jungkook's involvement with FIFA World Cup-related activities introduced him to what is genuinely one of the largest, most diverse, and most passionate global audiences that exists in any form of entertainment or sports. Football fandom spans nearly every country on Earth, cutting across cultural, linguistic, and demographic lines in a way that few other global phenomena can match. For Jungkook to gain visibility within that audience, even among fans who may have had little to no prior interest in K-pop, represents an enormous expansion of his overall reach. And based on comments we are seeing circulate online, that exposure appears to be translating into genuine, lasting interest rather than a brief, fleeting curiosity. I also want to talk about how this kind of moment tends to be remembered within fandom history over the long run. Certain achievements fade from memory relatively quickly, overtaken by whatever the next big milestone happens to be. But genuinely unusual, record-setting moments like a near-instantaneous, multi-continent luxury sellout tend to stick around much longer in the collective memory of a fandom, often referenced again in future retrospective content, anniversary videos, or career highlight compilations years down the line. This is exactly the kind of story that fans are likely to bring up again in the future as an example of just how far Jungkook's individual influence had expanded at this particular stage of his career. I also want to mention how moments like this tend to compound over time in terms of building an artist's overall global brand power. Every new audience segment that gets introduced to an artist through a different entry point, whether that is sports, fashion, film, or any other industry, adds another layer to their overall public recognition. Someone who first discovered Jungkook through World Cup coverage might now also be aware of him through this Chanel fragrance story. That same person might then encounter him again through a future music release, a different brand partnership, or additional media coverage. Each of these touchpoints reinforces and builds upon the last, gradually expanding an artist's overall public footprint far beyond their original core fanbase. I also want to bring up how the timing of this campaign, landing so soon after his World Cup-related visibility, likely played a significant role in amplifying the overall result. Marketing timing is enormously important, and campaigns that launch while an individual's public profile is already experiencing a natural surge in attention tend to perform significantly better than campaigns launched during quieter periods. Whether intentional or simply fortunate timing on Chanel's part, releasing this fragrance campaign while Jungkook's global visibility was already elevated from his football-related exposure likely contributed meaningfully to just how explosive the initial demand turned out to be. Now, let's talk about what this means going forward for Jungkook's ongoing relationship with Chanel and potentially other luxury partnerships. When a campaign performs this dramatically well, brands typically take notice in a very tangible way. Successful campaigns like this one often lead to expanded partnerships, additional product lines, extended contract terms, or increased marketing investment behind future collaborations. If this level of demand and sellout speed continues with future releases tied to this partnership, it would not be surprising to see Chanel significantly deepen its collaboration with Jungkook moving forward, given just how strong the initial results have been. I also want to bring up the idea of scarcity psychology for a moment, because it plays a real role in why sellouts like this tend to generate even more excitement after the fact, rather than simply disappointing fans who missed out. When a product sells out this fast, it immediately creates a powerful secondary wave of conversation, driven by people who were unable to purchase it in time, expressing disappointment, sharing screenshots of sold-out pages, and asking whether restocks might be coming. That secondary wave of attention, even though it stems from frustration rather than celebration, still keeps the campaign an active online conversation for days or even weeks after the actual sellout event, extending its visibility far beyond the initial purchasing window itself. I also want to acknowledge how meaningful this moment is within the context of representation more broadly. Having a Korean artist serve as the global face of one of the most historically prestigious European luxury houses represents a significant shift in how these legacy fashion brands approach global market expansion and representation. For decades, the luxury fashion industry was dominated by a fairly narrow range of ambassador choices, often skewing heavily toward Western celebrities and models. The increasing presence of Korean and broader Asian artists as global faces for major luxury houses reflects a meaningful, ongoing shift in the industry's approach to global relevance, and results like this sellout only reinforce why that shift continues to accelerate. I also want to briefly mention how brands typically respond internally when they see this kind of overwhelming demand play out in real time. In many cases, a sellout of this scale prompts an immediate internal conversation about restocking, expanding production for future batches, or accelerating the rollout of additional products within the same campaign or line. If Chanel does choose to restock or expand this particular fragrance release in response to this demand, it would not be surprising at all, and it would only reinforce just how seriously major luxury brands are now taking this kind of Jungkook-driven demand surge when planning their broader product strategies going forward. Before we start wrapping up, I want to bring the conversation back to the fans themselves for a moment, because at the heart of every story like this is a community of people who genuinely care about supporting the artists they admire. Whether that support shows up through streaming, through concert attendance, or through purchasing a product tied to a brand partnership like this one, it all reflects the same underlying dedication that has made this fandom one of the most powerful and organized fan communities in the entire entertainment industry. Moments like this sellout are a direct reflection of that dedication translating into real, measurable impact within an entirely different industry. I also want to touch briefly on how this story might be perceived differently depending on which audience is reading about it. Within the existing fandom, this news was met largely with pride and excitement, a celebration of just how far Jungkook's individual influence has grown. Within broader Korean online culture, the reaction leaned more toward genuine astonishment, people simply processing the scale of the numbers involved. And within newer audiences, particularly those who discovered Jungkook through completely unrelated channels like sports coverage, the reaction often carried a tone of curious discovery, learning for the first time just how significant his overall public profile has become. Seeing all three of these distinct reactions playing out simultaneously across different corners of the internet is part of what made this story feel so genuinely widespread rather than confined to a single, predictable audience. I also want to point out how stories like this tend to have a ripple effect on future brand consideration. Other luxury houses, beauty brands, and fashion labels pay close attention to results like this when evaluating their own ambassador strategies. A sellout this fast and this widespread does not just benefit Chanel, it also reinforces Jungkook's overall market value across the entire luxury and fashion industry, potentially opening doors for future partnerships with other major brands looking to replicate this kind of impact. Let's also take a moment to appreciate just how unusual it is for a story like this, rooted in the luxury fragrance industry, to generate this much conversation within general entertainment and fandom spaces. Fragrance launches, even significant ones, do not typically become major viral topics of conversation outside of dedicated beauty and fashion communities. The fact that this particular launch broke through into much broader online conversation, complete with widely shared graphics showing the sold-out map, translated screenshots of netizen reactions, and ongoing discussion across multiple platforms, shows just how much attention Jungkook's individual activities continue to command across completely different corners of the internet. I also want to bring up one more angle before we wrap up, which is how this story fits into a much longer, ongoing narrative about the growing intersection between K-pop and the global luxury fashion industry as a whole. Over the past several years, we have watched multiple K-pop idols, from various different groups, take on prominent roles as global ambassadors for major fashion and beauty houses. Each new milestone within that broader trend adds further validation to the idea that K-pop artists are not just successful within their own music industry, but genuinely powerful commercial forces capable of driving real, measurable impact across completely different global industries as well. This particular sellout stands out as one of the clearest, most dramatic examples of that broader trend we have seen so far, and it will likely be referenced again in future conversations about the growing influence of K-pop artists within the luxury fashion space. As we bring this story together, I think what we are really looking at here is a snapshot of where Jungkook currently stands in terms of global commercial influence. A premium luxury fragrance, tied to one of the most prestigious fashion houses in the world, selling out across 28 countries within minutes, is not a small or easily replicated achievement. It reflects a combination of genuine artist popularity, expanding crossover appeal reaching well beyond the existing fanbase, and a brand partnership that clearly resonated far more powerfully than even Chanel likely anticipated going into this campaign. Before I let you go, I also want to remind everyone watching to always shop responsibly, especially when it comes to premium purchases like this one. Supporting an artist through a legitimate luxury brand partnership can be a genuinely fun and meaningful way to celebrate their success, but it should always come from a place of comfortable, considered spending rather than pressure or urgency. Sold-out moments like this one are exciting to follow and discuss, but no purchase, no matter how tied to an artist you love, is ever worth financial stress. If you missed out on this particular release, there will absolutely be future opportunities, future campaigns, and future moments to celebrate right alongside the rest of this incredible fandom. I want to know what you all think about this story. Were you surprised by how quickly this fragrance sold out across so many countries? Do you think this World Cup-driven crossover appeal is going to keep expanding Jungkook's reach even further in the coming months? Let me know your thoughts down in the comments. I always love reading through your reactions to stories like this. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up, and if you have not already subscribed to the channel, now is a great time to join. I cover BTS news, individual member updates, brand partnerships, and stories just like this one on a regular basis, so subscribing and turning on notifications means you will never miss an update when something like this breaks. Thank you so much for watching, Army. Stories like this one are always exciting to cover, because they capture something bigger than just a single sellout event. They capture the ongoing growth of an artist's influence reaching into entirely new spaces, and that kind of expansion is genuinely fascinating to watch unfold in real time. Until next time, take care of yourselves, and I will see you in the next video.